My sister didn't just steal the man I was going to marry. She tried to steal my memories, my history, my very identity. She thought she'd torn my world down, so completely that I'd never be able to build it back up. But she forgot one crucial thing. I was the one who taught her how to play the long game. And my game was just beginning. If you've ever been betrayed so deeply it felt like a part of you died, then you know what it's like to fight your way back into the light. This is the story of how I did that. Stick around, because the ending is worth it. And if you find yourself holding your breath right alongside me, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe. It tells me that my story, my fight matters. Claire and I grew up sharing a room, a world contained within 4 pale pink walls. Our beds were twin islands, separated by a narrow channel of beige carpet, and across that channel we shared everything. Secrets were the currency of our childhood, whispered into the darkness long after our parents thought we were asleep. I'd tell her about my crush on the boy in math class. She'd tell me about the argument she overheard between our parents. We constructed our lives out of these shared confidences, building a fortress of sisterhood that I believed was impenetrable. I was the older sister by 2 years, a gap that felt like a decade. I was the responsible one, the planner, the one who built the forts out of blankets and chairs. Claire was the one who decorated them, adding a touch of magic, a string of fairy lights she'd pilfered from the Christmas box. I was the steady earth. She was the glittering, unpredictable fire. People were drawn to her easy laugh, and the way she could make the most mundane story sound like a thrilling adventure. I didn't mind. I loved seeing her shine. It was my job, I thought, to be the solid foundation she could dance upon. Our parents encouraged this dynamic. "Mandy, watch out for your sister," was the constant refrain. And I did. I proofread her essays. I covered for her when she missed curfew. I was the shoulder she cried on when her heart was broken for the first, second, and third time. I was dependable Mandy. Good old Mandy. Then came Liam. He wasn't like the boys Claire usually dated. He wasn't a fleeting infatuation or a summer romance. He was quiet, thoughtful. He had this way of listening, really listening, that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. We met in a university literature class, bonding over a shared love for tragic Russian novels. He saw the parts of me that weren't just dependable. He saw the dreamer, the artist, the woman who wanted more than just a quiet, sensible life. Our love story wasn't a whirlwind. It was a slow build, like a beautiful home being constructed brick by brick. We spent weekends hiking, our conversations meandering for miles through forests thick with the smell of pine and damp earth. He'd make me coffee in the morning, remembering I liked just a whisper of cinnamon in it. I'd bake his favorite lemon drizzle cake, the sharp, sweet scent filling our small apartment. He was my partner, my best friend, the missing piece of my soul I didn't even know was gone. Claire, of course, was thrilled for me, or so I thought. When I first brought Liam home for a family dinner, she was her most charming self. She laughed at all his jokes, asked him insightful questions about his architectural studies, and made him feel instantly welcome. "He's perfect, Mandy," she'd squealed later that night, hugging me tightly. "I'm so happy for you. You deserve this." And I believed her. I saw her enthusiasm as a reflection of my own joy. When Liam proposed 2 years later, on a wind-swept cliff overlooking the ocean at sunset, Claire was the first person I called, my voice shaking with happiness. "We have to start planning," she'd shrieked down the phone. "I'll be the best maid of honor in history. This wedding is going to be a masterpiece." And just like when we were kids, I let her. I was the architect, designing the life I wanted with Liam. Claire, I thought, was just adding the fairy lights. She threw herself into the role with a terrifying intensity. She scouted venues, she interrogated florists, she had spreadsheets for everything from guest RSVPs to the specific shade of ivory for the napkins. "You're working so hard, Claire," I told her one afternoon, as we sat surrounded by fabric swatches. "You don't have to do all this." She waved a dismissive hand, her smile bright and brittle. Don't be silly. This is what sisters are for. Besides, you and Liam are so busy. Just think of me as your wedding fairy godmother. It started subtly, little things that felt wrong, like a single note played off-key in a beautiful symphony. Liam would come home late from work, smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine, the same floral scent Claire always wore. He'd say he'd been held up at the site. Claire would say she was helping him pick out tile for a client's bathroom remodel. It made sense. They were both in design-adjacent fields. It was convenient. Then there were the inside jokes, a quiet laugh shared between them across the dinner table that I wasn't privy to, a knowing glance. When I'd ask what was funny, they'd just say, "Oh, it's nothing. A stupid work thing." I started to feel like a stranger in my own life, a guest at a party for two. The internal monologue began, a quiet, insistent whisper of doubt. Am I going crazy? Am I being paranoid? This is Claire. This is Liam. They would never. I pushed the thoughts down. I told myself I was just stressed from the wedding planning, from the pressure of it all. I was inventing problems where there were none. I trusted them. I had to. The alternative was unthinkable. The discovery wasn't dramatic. There was no walking in on them, no climactic, screaming confrontation. It was quieter, colder, and 1,000 times more brutal. I was looking for a specific book of poetry in Liam's home office, a book I'd given him on our first anniversary. It wasn't on the shelf. I checked his desk drawers, and then, on a whim, I looked in the bottom filing cabinet, the one he used for old projects and papers. Tucked away at the back, behind a stack of outdated blueprints, was a small wooden box. It wasn't mine. I'd never seen it before. My heart started a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. My hands felt cold and slick as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a collection of secrets. A dried flower, a gardenia, Claire's favorite. A ticket stub from a movie I knew Liam had claimed to see with a work friend. A silver locket. My breath caught in my throat. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Inside were 2 tiny photos. One of Liam, one of Claire. But it was the letters that broke me. Dozens of them. Handwritten notes on thick, creamy paper. Not from Claire to Liam, but from Liam to Claire. I see you, even when she's the one talking. It's always you. Today at the cater tasting, all I could think about was how your laugh is the sweetest sound in the world. I feel like I'm living a lie. I love her, I do. But I'm in love with you. What are we going to do? The words blurred through my tears. The air in the room grew thin and sharp. Each breath a shard of glass in my lungs. I sank to the floor, the letters fluttering around me like dead leaves. The foundation of my world, the impenetrable fortress of sisterhood, the beautiful home I had built with Liam, it all crumbled into dust. I sat there for hours, I think. The sun set, casting long, menacing shadows across the room. I felt nothing and everything all at once. A vast, hollow emptiness where my heart used to be, and a white-hot rage that licked at the edges of my sanity. When I heard Liam's key in the door, I didn't move. He found me there on the floor, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal. The look on his face was not one of shock or even guilt. It was relief, the weary relief of a man whose terrible secret was finally out. "Mandy," he breathed, his voice barely a whisper. "I can explain." I just looked at him, my eyes dry now. "Can you?" Claire arrived 20 minutes later. Liam must have called her. She burst through the door, her face a mask of frantic concern. "Mandy, oh my God, are you okay?" "Liam called. He said you were upset." She stopped when she saw the open box, the letters scattered on the floor. Her mask slipped. For a fraction of a second, I saw her for what she was. Not my glittery, magical little sister, but a thief standing in the ruins of a home she'd helped destroy. "You're twisting this," she said, her voice regaining its strength, its familiar, cloying sweetness. "You're stressed. You're not seeing things clearly." I'm seeing things clearly for the first time in my life, I said, my voice eerily calm. The gaslighting that followed was a masterclass in psychological warfare. They were a united front. It was a deep, emotional connection, not a sordid affair. It had just happened. A force of nature they were powerless to stop. They didn't want to hurt me. In fact, in a sick, twisted way, this was all for the best. "Don't you see, Mandy?" Claire said, kneeling in front of me, her eyes wide and earnest. "It was a performance, and a damn good one. This proves that you and Liam weren't right for each other. In a way, I did you a favor. I saved you from a lifetime of unhappiness. A favor." She had ripped my heart out of my chest, and she was calling it a favor. That was the moment the grief curdled into something else. Something hard and cold and sharp. It was a tiny seed of vengeance, planted in the barren wasteland of my heart. Liam left that night. He packed a bag, his eyes refusing to meet mine, and went to stay with a friend. Claire stayed. She insisted on taking care of me. She made me tea I didn't drink. She fluffed pillows I couldn't rest my head on. She sat on the edge of my bed, chattering on about how we would get through this, how our sisterhood was stronger than any man. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the silence in my own head screaming louder than her words. She was positioning herself as the saint, the long-suffering sister forced into an impossible situation by fate. And as I listened to her spin her web of lies, I knew what was coming. She wasn't just stealing my fiancé. She was stealing my story. She was going to paint me as the unstable, jealous woman who drove her perfect man into the arms of another. Her sister, no less. And in that moment, lying in the wreckage of my life, I made a silent promise to myself. She could have him. She could have the hollow shell of the life we were supposed to build. But I would be damned if I let her have the last word. This was not the end of my story. It was just the end of the beginning. The days that followed were a blur of muted gray. The vibrant colors of my world had been leached away, leaving behind only the stark, skeletal outlines of a life that was no longer mine. I moved through my apartment like a ghost, my own reflection a stranger in the mirror. Who was that woman with the hollow eyes and the tangled hair? She couldn't be me. I was Mandy, dependable Mandy, the one who had everything figured out. The physical symptoms of heartbreak are a cruel joke. It's not just an emotional pain, it's a corporeal one, a constant, heavy ache in the center of your chest, as if a vital organ has been scooped out, leaving a raw, gaping void. Food tasted like cardboard. Sleep was a distant country I could no longer visit, my nights spent staring into the darkness, replaying every lie, every stolen glance, every moment of my own blindness. Claire's performance continued, escalating in its audacity. She would call me a dozen times a day, her voice dripping with syrupy concern. "Are you eating, Mandy? I can bring over some soup. You need to keep your strength up." She was playing the role of the devoted sister for an invisible audience, crafting her narrative. The real poison, however, came from my parents. When I finally found the strength to call them, to tell them what had happened, the response was not the wave of unconditional support I had naively expected. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line, and then my mother's voice, tight and strained. "Oh, Mandy, that's terrible. But are you sure you have the whole story? Claire would never intentionally hurt you. They came over that weekend, not to comfort me, but to mediate, to manage the fallout. They sat on my couch, the same couch where Liam and I had cuddled and dreamed of our future, and they urged me to be the bigger person. Your sister is heartbroken over this," my father said, his gaze fixed on a point just over my shoulder. "She and Liam, they made a terrible mistake. But families forgive. We have to find a way to move forward. For the sake of peace. For the sake of peace." The phrase echoed in the silent apartment long after they left. Whose peace? Not mine. My peace had been detonated. They wanted me to sweep the shattered pieces of my life under the rug, so we could all pretend the floor was still perfectly intact. They were asking me to absorb the blow, to swallow the pain, to be the family shock absorber one more time. Because Claire was the fragile one. I was the strong one. I could handle it. The social fallout was just as swift and just as brutal. Claire and Liam, now a public couple, were masterful storytellers. They didn't shout their version from the rooftops. They did it through concerned whispers, through sad smiles and heavy sighs to our mutual friends. The story they spun was tragic, inevitable. Liam had been having doubts for months. I had become distant, obsessed with the wedding, not with him. I was pushing him away. Claire, dear Claire, had only been there as a friend to both of them, a shoulder to cry on. And then, tragically, unexpectedly, love blossomed. Friends I had known for years started to avoid my calls. Invitations to group gatherings dried up. I saw them once at the grocery store. A group of our friends huddled together in the produce aisle. They were laughing with Claire, who was hanging on Liam's arm, looking radiant and just a little bit tragic. When they saw me, the laughter died. An awkward, suffocating silence fell over the group. One of them, Sarah, gave me a small, pitying wave before they all turned and hurried away, leaving me standing alone by the avocados, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. They had chosen their side. I was officially a pariah. My world had shrunk to the four walls of my apartment and the sterile, anonymous confines of my office. Work was the only escape. I poured every ounce of my energy into my architectural projects, working late into the night, fueled by stale coffee and a burning need to build something, anything, that couldn't be taken away from me. My boss praised my dedication, my new, laser-like focus. He didn't know I was building skyscrapers on a foundation of pure rage. My lowest point came about 3 months after the implosion. It was a Tuesday. It would have been our wedding day. I'd managed to forget until a memories notification popped up on my phone. Caterer final payment due. I stared at the cheerful, automated reminder until the words swam. I threw the phone across the room, watching it shatter against the wall. The sound was satisfyingly violent. That night, I did something I knew I shouldn't. I drove to the restaurant where Liam and I had our first date. It was a stupid, self-destructive impulse. And there they were, sitting at our table by the window, bathed in the warm, romantic glow of the candlelight. Liam was laughing, reaching across the table to brush a strand of hair from Claire's face. She leaned into his touch, her smile luminous. They looked happy, blissfully, infuriatingly happy. They were living my life, and they were wearing it better than I ever had. I drove home in a daze, parked the car, and walked into my empty apartment. The silence was a physical presence. It pressed in on me from all sides, and I finally broke. I crumpled to the floor of the hallway, a guttural sob tearing its way out of my throat. It wasn't a quiet, dignified cry. It was a raw, animalistic howl of pain and rage and utter, bottomless despair. I pounded my fists against the hardwood floor until my knuckles were bruised and bloody, the physical pain a welcome distraction from the inferno in my soul. I screamed until my voice was raw, until there was nothing left inside me but a hollow, echoing emptiness. I lay there on the cold floor for hours, the shattered pieces of my phone glinting in the moonlight. This was it. This was rock bottom, the place where you either let the darkness swallow you whole, or you start to claw your way back out. For a long time, I considered just letting go, disappearing, but then I thought of her face, Claire's face, her triumphant, beatific smile as she lived the life she had stolen from me. The image of her, so perfectly happy in the ruins of my own happiness, was like a splash of ice water. The rage, which had been a destructive fire, began to cool and solidify. It became something different, something focused. It became fuel. I stood up, my body aching, my throat raw. I walked to the bathroom and looked at the stranger in the mirror. The woman with the bloodshot eyes, the tear-streaked face, the bruised hands. No more, I whispered to her reflection. You will not let her win. That night, I didn't just decide to survive. I decided to rebuild. But the new structure I was going to create wouldn't be the same open, trusting home I'd designed before. This one would have walls of steel, and it would be built for one purpose: to withstand the storm that was coming. The next day, I called a real estate agent in a city 300 miles away. I put my apartment up for sale. I requested a transfer at work, citing a need for a change of scenery. I packed up the few things that didn't remind me of him, selling or donating the rest. I was shedding my old life like a snake sheds its skin. My last conversation with my parents before I left was a case study in willful blindness. "Mandy, are you sure about this?" my mother pleaded. "Running away won't solve anything. Your sister misses you terribly." "I'm not running away," I said, my voice as cold and flat as a frozen lake. "I'm starting over. And as for Claire, tell her not to worry. I'm sure she's far too busy to miss me." The U-Haul was packed. I took one last look at the apartment, now sterile and empty, an echo chamber of memories I was determined to silence. As I drove out of my hometown, the place that held every memory of my life so far, I didn't look back. In my rear-view mirror, I saw the familiar skyline shrink and disappear. I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. But for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't pain or rage. It was a dangerous, thrilling spark of possibility. The board was cleared. Now I could start setting my own pieces. The new city was anonymous and sprawling, a concrete and glass landscape that had no memory of me. It was perfect. The first few months were a Spartan existence. I worked, I ate, I slept. My new apartment was bare, the walls a stark white, the furniture functional and impersonal. I was in a self-imposed exile, a purification ritual to burn away the last vestiges of my old life. My work became my sanctuary. In the clean lines and logical progressions of architecture, I found a sense of order that was missing from my own chaotic, emotional world. I took on the most challenging projects, the ones no one else wanted. I worked weekends. I earned a reputation as the fiercely dedicated, slightly intimidating designer from out of town. My colleagues were polite but kept their distance. I preferred it that way. I was building a new foundation, and it required my complete and undivided attention. Slowly, methodically, I started to piece myself back together. I found a gym near my apartment and began channeling my residual anger into punishing workouts. The burn in my muscles was a clean, honest pain, one that I could control. I started exploring the city on long, solitary walks, discovering hidden parks and quiet coffee shops where no one knew my name or my story. I was becoming a new person, forged in the crucible of betrayal. Stronger, sharper, colder. It was in one of those quiet coffee shops, a year after my move, that I met Alex. He wasn't my type. Or rather, he wasn't my old type. Liam had been charmingly boyish with a quick, easy smile that was designed to win people over. Alex was still. He was a landscape architect who sat in the same corner every morning, sketching in a notebook, a look of intense concentration on his face. He had kind eyes and a quiet confidence that didn't demand attention. Our first conversation was about the structural integrity of the cafe's exposed ceiling beams. It was a nerd's romance, and it was exactly what I needed. He didn't try to charm me. He engaged me. He listened to my opinions with genuine interest. He saw my mind before he saw anything else. Our courtship was as slow and deliberate as the life I was building. He never pushed. He seemed to understand, without me ever saying a word, that I was carrying a heavy past. He gave me space when I needed it and a steady, comforting presence when the ghosts of my old life came knocking. One evening, after we had been seeing each other for about 6 months, we were cooking dinner at his place. The kitchen was filled with the warm, savory scent of garlic and rosemary. He looked at me across the island and said, simply, "Something broke you once, didn't it?" I froze, a knife hovering over a half-chopped onion. My first instinct was to deflect to build a wall. But looking into his calm, compassionate eyes, I felt the defenses I had so carefully constructed begin to crumble. And so, for the first time, I told someone the whole story. I told them about Claire, about Liam, about the lies and the gaslighting and the crushing weight of my family's betrayal. I laid the ugliness of it all out between us, half expecting him to recoil. He just listened. When I was finished, my voice hoarse, he came around the island, gently took the knife from my hand, and wrapped his arms around me. He held me as a fresh wave of old grief washed over me. He didn't offer platitudes or solutions. He just held me, a silent, solid anchor in a storm I thought I'd left behind. Her greatest mistake, he said quietly into my hair, was underestimating you. With Alex, I learned what real love felt like. It wasn't a dizzying, all-consuming passion. It was a quiet, sturdy thing. A partnership built on respect and honesty. He celebrated my strength, but he also made it safe for me to be vulnerable. He was the steel reinforcement in my new foundation. 2 years after we met, he proposed. We were on a trip to the coast, standing on a balcony overlooking a calm, moonlit sea. There was no grand gesture, no audience. Just him on one knee, holding a simple, elegant ring that he had designed himself. It had a single, clear sapphire. For new beginnings, he said. As I said yes, tears of pure, unadulterated joy streaming down my face, a thought, cold and clear as the stone in the ring, crystallized in my mind. A wedding, a celebration of love and new beginnings. What better stage could there possibly be for a final act of justice? The idea took root, a dark, thorny vine winding its way around my newfound happiness. Was I being petty? Was I dragging the past into the beautiful future Alex and I were building? I wrestled with it for weeks. I discussed it with Alex, laying bare my desire not for revenge in the traditional sense, but for reclamation. The reclamation of my own story. They never faced a single consequence. I told him one night, my voice tight. They got everything they wanted, and they walked away smelling like roses, leaving me in the dirt. They built their happiness on my destruction and then convinced the world that I was the architect of my own ruin. I just want the truth to have its moment in the sun. One moment. Alex, my wonderful, solid Alex, took my hand. Then, that's what we'll give it. This is your story, Mandy. You get to write the ending. I'm with you, whatever you decide. His support was the final piece. The moral ambiguity I felt evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't about hurting them anymore. This was about healing me. This was about closing a chapter so that a new one could truly begin. And so the planning began. But this time, I wasn't a naive, trusting girl letting her sister add the fairy lights. I was the master architect, and every detail of this event was a carefully placed load-bearing wall in my grand design. The venue, a magnificent old bank converted into a grand ballroom. Soaring ceilings, marble columns, glittering chandeliers. It was a place of public record, of transactions and accountability. A place where things were made official. It was ostentatiously, unapologetically public. There would be no hiding. The guest list. This was the masterstroke. We invited everyone. My entire extended family. The aunts, uncles, and cousins who had taken Claire's side with their silence and their pitying looks. All of our old mutual friends. The ones who had ghosted me. The ones who had believed the lies. And of course, a place of honor for my parents. The invitation, it went out to Mrs. Claire and Mr. Liam Gables. I used his last name, a subtle twist of the knife, a reminder that she had what she wanted. I received Claire's RSVP almost immediately. It was a gushing, multi-page letter on floral stationery, congratulating me on finally moving on and finding someone. She was over the moon for me and couldn't wait to celebrate. She even included a recent photo of her and Liam, smiling on a beach. The arrogance was breathtaking. She saw my wedding not as a threat, but as her ultimate vindication, proof that she had been right all along, that her betrayal had indeed been a favor. The role, I asked my best friend from my new life, a woman named Maya who knew the whole story, to be my maid of honor. Claire would be seated at a prominent table near the front with our parents, close enough to see everything, close enough for everyone to see her. A guest, but an observer, powerless. The toast! This was the centerpiece, the final explosive charge. I spent weeks crafting it. I wrote and rewrote it dozens of times. It couldn't be a hysterical rant. It had to be delivered with the cool, smiling poise of a happy bride. It had to be elegant, undeniable, and utterly devastating. I practiced it in front of the mirror, my voice calm and steady, while inside, my heart hammered with a mixture of terror and exhilarating anticipation. I memorized the words until they were a part of me, a creed etched into my soul. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a strange mix of genuine happiness and cold, calculated plotting. I went to dress fittings with Maya, giddy with excitement. I tasted cakes with Alex, laughing as we got frosting on our noses. These moments were real, my love for him the truest thing in my life. But beneath it all, the countdown timer was ticking. The day before the wedding, a package arrived. It was a wedding gift from Claire. I opened it with trepidation. Inside was a ridiculously expensive crystal vase and a card. "Dearest Mandy," it read, "I am so proud of the woman you've become. I know the past was difficult, but I truly believe everything happens for a reason. Seeing you so happy is all I've ever wanted. All my love, your sister, Claire." I laughed. It was a harsh, humorless sound. She was still trying to write the story, still trying to cast herself as the benevolent guide in my journey. She had no idea that I had taken the pen from her hand. Tomorrow I would be reading from my own script. The trap was set. The invitations had been accepted. The audience was gathering. I looked at myself in the mirror, holding her condescending note in my hand. A calm I hadn't felt in years settled over me. There was no more anger, no more pain. There was only focus, the cold, serene focus of an architect on the verge of unveiling her masterpiece. The morning of my wedding dawned bright and impossibly clear, the kind of brilliant blue sky that feels like a promise. A nervous energy hummed in the air, but it wasn't the frantic, stressful energy I remembered from my first, aborted trip to the altar. This was different. It was the electric thrum of potential, the quiet hum of a powerful machine ready to be switched on. Getting ready with Maya and my closest friends for my new life was a joyful, champagne-fueled affair. They fussed over my hair and makeup, their laughter echoing in the bridal suite. They saw a radiant, happy bride, and I was. My love for Alex was a warm, steady flame in my core. But they didn't see the icy resolve that encased it, the part of me that was a general going into her final battle. I saw Claire for the first time, just before the ceremony. She swept into the room in a dress of shimmering rose gold, a shade just a little too close to bridal, a little too attention-grabbing. Her smile was dazzling, practiced. "Mandy, you look breathtaking," she gushed, pulling me into a hug that felt like being embraced by a beautiful, cold statue. The scent of her perfume, that same floral scent, was a ghost from another lifetime. "I am just so happy for you. Truly." "Thank you for coming, Claire," I said, my voice even and pleasant. I met her eyes over her shoulder in the mirror. For a fleeting moment, her smile faltered. She saw something in my reflection, something she didn't recognize, a coolness, an absence of the old, familiar pain she was used to seeing. She pulled away, her expression momentarily unsettled before the brilliant smile snapped back into place. The ceremony itself was everything I had ever dreamed of, but never dared to hope for. As I walked down the aisle, the magnificent ballroom filled with familiar faces, I didn't see an audience of my enemies. I saw the stage. My gaze was fixed on Alex, who stood waiting for me at the altar, his eyes shining with a love so pure and unwavering it took my breath away. Our vows weren't flowery promises. They were declarations of partnership, of respect, of a future we were choosing to build together on solid ground. When he slipped the wedding band on my finger, his hand was warm and steady in mine. This was real. This was mine. The reception was a dazzling spectacle. The chandeliers cast a golden glow over the 100 guests, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses swelling to fill the cavernous space. The food was exquisite, the music was perfect. I danced with my new husband, my head resting on his shoulder, feeling completely, utterly safe. Throughout the dinner, I was acutely aware of Claire. She was holding court at her table, regaling our relatives with stories, her hands gesturing dramatically. She soaked up the attention, the prodigal daughter who had made a mistake but was now a happy, settled wife. Liam sat beside her, looking older and more tired than I remembered, a placid, smiling prop for her performance. My parents watched her with beaming pride. They were all playing their parts perfectly, blissfully unaware that the play was about to take a very sharp, very public turn. After the main course, the DJ announced it was time for the toasts. Maya gave a beautiful, heartfelt speech that made me cry. Alex's best man told a few funny, embarrassing stories that made everyone laugh. And then it was my turn. Alex squeezed my hand under the table. "Ready," he whispered. "Ready." I breathed back. I rose from my seat, my champagne flute in hand. A hush fell over the room. 100 pairs of eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath, the scent of champagne and roses filling my lungs. I found Claire's table. She was looking at me expectantly, a proud, sisterly smile plastered on her face. I began, my voice warm and clear, carrying easily through the silent ballroom. "Thank you all so much for being here to celebrate with me and Alex," I started, smiling at the sea of faces. "Looking out at all of you, my heart is so full. A wedding at its core is about love, but it's also about truth. It's about standing up in front of the world and declaring your truth, your commitment, your story." I let the words hang in the air for a moment. Guests were nodding, smiling. This was standard bride speech territory. I took a small sip of champagne. "Many of you have known me my whole life. You've watched me grow up. You've been there for good times and for bad. And for that, I am truly grateful. Family and history are so incredibly important." My eyes drifted to my parents, who were beaming. They shape who we are. I turned my body slightly, my gaze locking directly onto my sister. Her smile was still in place, but it was becoming fixed, uncertain. "Some of you know my sister, Claire," I continued, my tone remaining light and conversational. The entire room's attention followed my gaze, 100 heads turning to spotlight her table. I could feel the energy in the room shift. The air grew thick with anticipation. "Years ago," I said, my voice dropping just a fraction, becoming more intimate, more confessional, "I was engaged to be married to another man. I loved him very much. I was building a life with him, a life that my own sister, my maid of honor, was helping me plan." A ripple of shock went through the room. Forks clattered onto plates. The silence was no longer polite. It was absolute, heavy, and profound. I could see Claire's face, even from a distance. The smile was gone, replaced by a frozen mask of horror. Her skin, which had been fashionably tanned, was rapidly turning a blotchy, mortified crimson. Liam was staring intently at his water glass, as if it held the secrets to the universe. "Claire thought," I went on, my voice ringing with a newfound clarity and power, "that she could take my happiness away by taking that man for herself. She thought she could steal my future and rewrite my past. And for a moment she succeeded." I paused, letting the indictment settle. I saw the dawning comprehension on the faces of my relatives, the shocked, guilty looks on the faces of our old friends who had so readily believed her version of events. They were all trapped, forced to listen to the truth they had so conveniently ignored. "She succeeded for a moment, but only for a moment," I declared, my voice rising with triumph. "Because what she didn't realize, what she could never understand, is that she didn't trap me in my grief. She freed me. She freed me from a life that was half a lie. She freed me from a man who lacked the courage to be honest. And she freed me to find something real, something true. I turned back to my husband, my heart overflowing with love and gratitude. I raised my glass to him. She freed me to find Alex, a man whose love is built on a foundation of respect, not deceit. Alex stood up beside me, his presence solid and unwavering. He took my free hand and raised his own glass, his voice clear and proud. "To my wife," he said, his eyes locked on mine, "the bravest, most honest woman I know." For a heartbeat, there was stunned silence, and then the room erupted. It wasn't just polite applause. It was a roar. It was a standing ovation. People were cheering. Glasses were clinking. Laughter, sharp and liberating, rose to the ceiling. It was a tidal wave of vindication, washing over the entire room, cleansing the air of all the old lies. I looked back at Claire's table. She was a broken statue in the midst of the celebration, trembling, crimson, utterly exposed under the glittering lights. Her eyes met mine across the room, and in them I saw not hatred, but something far more satisfying, defeat. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. She just sank back into her chair, small and insignificant, her carefully constructed world shattered around her. Her husband, Liam, finally looked up, his face pale and slack with shame. He put a hand on her arm, but she flinched away from his touch. I took a long, deep drink from my champagne glass. The bubbles burst on my tongue, and the taste was sweeter and more intoxicating than anything I had ever known. It was the taste of victory, the taste of truth. The rest of the night was a joyful blur. People came up to me, not with pity but with respect. Old friends apologized, their eyes filled with a new understanding. My relatives looked at me differently, as if seeing me for the first time not as dependable Mandy, but as a woman you did not cross. Claire and Liam slipped out before the cake was even cut, a quiet, ignominious retreat. I didn't watch them go. They were no longer relevant. Later that night, as Alex and I had our final dance in the nearly empty ballroom, he held me close. "Are you okay?" he asked. I looked up at him, the man who had given me the strength to reclaim my story. "I'm better than okay," I said, a genuine, unburdened smile spreading across my face. "I'm free." She had stolen a chapter of my life, a chapter filled with what I thought was love and trust. But I was the one who got to write the ending. And it was a masterpiece. Betrayal can feel like the end of the world, but sometimes it's just clearing the path for the world you were truly meant to have. The best revenge isn't just about settling a score. It's about building a life so full of truth and happiness that the past loses all its power. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever fought your way back from the brink, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice and sweet, sweet revenge. Remember, you are always the author of your own final chapter.